Hello, Mike.
Hello, how you doing?
Thank you for joining us today at the Essay Institute in Paris.
Thank you for having me.
For the few people who don't know you, can you tell us briefly who you are and what you do?
My name is Michael Miller, also known as Mike Snotty. In the industry, I'm an audio engineer. Just record music all day, every day, mix a few records here and there. Work with some of your favorite artists, you know, ranging from Ludacris, Nicki Minaj, Beyonce. Worked a lot with Sean Garrett, Bangladesh. You know, the list goes on. And pretty much, man, I love what I do. You know what I mean? So that's the main thing. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, exactly. And can you tell us how you started in music, in making music?
In making music, I pretty much started by actually just recording family members at a young age, tearing things apart, you know, and putting them back together, trying to make things sound a lot better, enhancing the quality that, you know, I could actually work with at the time. And also basically just going to school. You know, I didn't go to SAE, however, I went to Full Sail in Orlando. Got my education there, but then started interning at Patchwork Recording Studios out of Atlanta, Georgia. And to be honest, I learned most of everything I know now actually there, you know, under Leslie Brathwaite. He was a mix engineer at the time, and I was his assistant for about 2 years. And just, you know, honing in on my own skills and, you know, doing a lot of research. That's pretty much how I got started in the industry. It definitely wasn't easy. You know, I was definitely an intern for, you know, numerous years. Did it for free, you know, just picking up trash, getting, going on food runs, just doing odd end jobs any way that I could stay in the studio and learn as much as I possibly could. So, you know, the more they built some trust in me, you know what I mean, I was able to move up in the world and, you know, start assisting and recording.
Yeah, right. So you pretty much built yourself your own experience. You know, from the beginning, you learn by yourself. But what you think is your first achievement as a music producer?
As far as like audio engineering, I think my first biggest achievement for me was just believing in myself, actually going to school and taking a chance to actually, you know, put some money into investing in what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, and actually graduating from school, you know, to be able to do what I'm doing now. Landing the internship was a big accomplishment for me before I even started recording. Another step in my career was to become an assistant engineer, and, you know, just working with Leslie Brathwaite and numerous other engineers that I worked with along the way that I looked up to was a big accomplishment for me. To actually get hired in a major studio out of Atlanta as a staff engineer was a huge accomplishment for me in a city that I definitely wanted to come to, you know, even before I started this whole music thing. And now, you know, mixing records, you know what I mean? That's, to me, you know, and where I wanted to be for my you know, goals that I have, to just be able to start mixing records and have people like, you know, seeing what you've done, being a tracking engineer and liking some of your rough mixes and things of that nature, and liking what you do to their records, to be able to be asked, yo, can you mix my record? And it's for this label and for this artist, you know, that's just, it was like a dream come true, you know what I mean? To have somebody actually believe in, you know, all the hard work and everything that you've done to get to this point. So those are the things right now that are major accomplishments for me.
And one thing that will interest very much all the students of the EC is how did you get your first internship in the studio, and then how did you move up to assistant and then mixing? Can you tell us something about that?
You know, while I was in college learning, you know, about audio engineering or the things that I could remember, I would pretty much just call the studio, you know, that I wanted to go to, which was Patchwork at the time, you know, almost every single day that I can remember. You know, to almost to the point where, you know, they told me to kind of stop calling and wait till I got further on along in, you know, into the program before I started sending my resume and things of that nature. But even at that, you know what I mean, I still stayed at them, still called and stayed in contact with various, you know, engineers and just interns also, front desk people at the same time would send them different projects I might have worked on, whether it be good or bad. You know, I would just take any kind of chance that I could. I knew it was going to be definitely a challenge for me, simply because, you know, that was the most popular studio at the time, especially being in the southern regions, in Orlando, Florida. You know, the biggest ones were out of Miami. But as far as Atlanta, Georgia goes, you know, Patchwork at the time was the place to go. So I knew it would be a challenge because a lot of other students, you know, definitely wanted to go there. But just to make my mark, I just, you know, try to work as hard as I possibly could, you know, hands-on and, you know, with book and reading material as well. But, you know, I just felt like, you know, I had to go visit before I graduated to see if I even liked the studios, if I even liked the environment or the people there. And I think I just landed really just, you know, I nailed my interview. You know what I mean? I was honest, you know, truthful. Told them some of my shortcomings that I had along the way. You know, I'm not proud to admit, but I am at the same time. I failed the class, you know what I mean? Missed it by, you know, a smidgen, you know, to continue to the next class. I had to pay for an extra month, you know, rent and, you know, all kinds of things. But, you know, I think sometimes failures, you know, create their own successes at times. That's pretty much how I landed it. You know, like I said, I nailed my internship, or not my internship, but my interview. They called me back like within the next week, you know, after I graduated, you know, to actually start working there. I think a lot of my background, just from my parents and, you know, instilling in me hard work and good ethics and, you know, playing sports in college as well, as far as teamwork and, you know, organization and things of that nature, played a big factor in, you know, to me landing it. Also being confident, but yet humble, you know, and I think I showcased that while I was actually in the interview. I don't know, just having a good attitude, I guess, you know. Yeah, I think it landed. And just, you know, just good timing. You know what I mean? It was some interns that, you know, got pushed on and bumped up to the next level and let go as well. And they were looking for a whole new batch of interns to come along. And, you know, I just got the opportunity and took full advantage of it.
And so today you are here to pass things to SAE students. And what is your message? What do you want to tell them today?
I don't want my message to be cliche. And, you know, a lot of times I think early on when I would even teach, you know, at certain SAEs back in Atlanta, I had a certain, you know, focus on what I wanted to tell them. I think it depends on each and every individual in each situation that I go to. Sometimes a lot of students like to learn about, well, how did you get started in the music industry? And other ones, you know, they tend to want to know more about the technical kind of aspect of it. So it all depends on whatever the students have, different questions that they have, because at one time I was actually in their seats, you know what I mean? And, you know, I would have so many questions, you know, about, you know, how does this work? How do you, you know, vibe with a particular artist you might not really like or enjoy? You know, how did you feel in your first session? You know, do you really think that I can get a job after I graduate? You know, I like to touch on any and everything possible, if time permits, you know, to just give them some insight because, you know, from my shoes at the time, there really weren't that many engineers that I could relate to or that, you know, would take the time to actually speak to them, you know what I mean, out of their busy schedule. So whatever they have, you know, in their minds that they're worried about or, you know, just have questions about, you know, I like to tackle them head on. One of the main things I want to do is also give, you know, New Skool Rules an opportunity, you know, to be seen as well, and thank them for me coming out here. But also for the students, just to see that, you know, engineering can take you all over the world, you know what I mean? Just if you just, you know, really go hard at it and really focus on, you know, your craft. So I think those are the things I really want to touch on.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And I hope you enjoy your stay in Paris.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.